Minecraft went from having an afterthought biome called Hell to having six different biomes in their own dimension in modern Minecraft. A dimension which, by the way, was added in a secret update. This is the journey from a throwaway feature made by Notch to its recently unearthed future that comes straight from modern Minecraft developers. Welcome to the history of the Nether, the scariest, strangest, and most iconic dimension in a video game. By the way, I would never stop telling you that greater than 99.9% of house fires happen to people who aren't subscribed to the IBX Toycat YouTube channel, and you can begin your subscription over there. Meanwhile, the Nether's beginning was in Java Edition Alpha 1.2 on Halloween of 2010. Prior to release, it was actually called the Slip, a reference to its ability to travel quickly across the overworld by using it. Every one block in the Nether was represented by 8 blocks in the overworld, which means if you need to travel, say 2,000 blocks, instead of going 2,000 overworld blocks, you simply put 2 Nether portals 250 blocks apart in the Nether, and now you can do the journey with 1/8 of the distance. However, the trade-off there obviously being this is the Hell dimension, and so you are going to go through a lot more risk. This was the first time that a new dimension had ever been added to Minecraft, and it was smart because it did grant access to glowstone and these 2 mobs in survival for the first time, as well as a new use to obsidian and the bonus feature of being able to travel quickly. This ghoulish high-risk, high-reward dimension was a really great gameplay mechanic, but it wasn't actually the start of the Nether. The real beginnings of the Nether were in the Hell biome, and yes, there really were trees in the original Hell biome, and this first released as a world option back in Minecraft in dev when you could select your own world type. You also spawned in a mossy cobblestone house, and this is weird enough by itself, but what really gets to me is the item stacking, because as we all know, Minecraft is famous for one thing, and that is going up to 64, except not in this version. Stacks of 99 of everything, by the way, in this chest near spawn. This wasn't carefully put together by a player, you just had access to all the blocks in Minecraft in a big old chest there. Minecraft in dev was a really strange time, but it is the time where the Nether begun, and the reason for it is that if you have a limited sized world, you're gonna run out of fun things to do with it eventually, so why not have a crazy different world type, and that world type was fulfilled by a world with trees and lava apparently, which is interesting enough to say. However, how did this become this? And the answer was Secret Friday updates. Early Minecraft was crazy. The team was literally 100 times smaller than it is now, but they managed to push out weekly updates anyway. The content of these updates was not known, nor was the release time a secret update indeed. Although later people worked out they were coming out on Fridays, making them the Secret Friday updates. These hidden updates included mechanics that would later fundamentally define the game, like minecarts, dungeons, and honestly, most true to the name of these updates, sneaking. All of these secret updates were important to Minecraft's history, and one of these sad truths about them is the fact that the updates were done so early on in Minecraft's history that the original files for all but the first are lost to time. An important reminder that even the biggest game of all time isn't perfectly preserved, and although there'd be no good reason to go back to most of these, the fact that they're missing is still tragically sad. Anyway, the last of these updates was the Halloween update, like I previously mentioned, coming out on the 30th of October 2010, but actually, this is a bit of a misconception. This was not a Secret Friday update. If you check that day, it actually released on a Saturday. Also, interestingly, this update was actually known ahead of time, being announced as early as October the 10th. This is the first ever screenshot of the Nether update, and first of all, it's crazy that, back then, official marketing and screenshots and hints were just, oh yeah, this is Notch clearly playing Minecraft, he's got a diamond pickaxe there, but also fascinating is the look at this dimension. Wow, imagine seeing this for the first time when all you've seen for Minecraft generation is this. It's an absolutely wild difference, and just looking at this screenshot already, I'm like, wow, the glowstone and the gravel and the netherrack, and it's not really that much by itself, but it is a entirely revolutionary way to play Minecraft, you might start assuming, and sadly, the truth behind that is that although this seemed like the really promising start of a new dimension, it actually languished untouched for a really long time, just being the way to get a few blocks as well as to faster travel the overworld. This was of course a valid use, but it got a lot better after... The official release of Minecraft was the first time they gave an explicit purpose to the players. They had to go and kill the Ender Dragon, and it's interesting because this was the first time they updated the Nether to try and tie these two old dimensions to the third one. You needed Ender Pearls and Blaze Rods exclusively coming from the Nether, and Ender Pearls exclusively coming from the Overworld, at least at that time. This was before all of these updates, because between the 30th of October 2010 and the full release of Minecraft, the Nether was untouched. There were many other things they were focused on, and so it was wild to say that this was the first time in a very long time that they actually had updated the Nether. And so obviously the release of the game came with a Nether Fortress, but this wasn't the existing Nether Fortress. This was one designed in 2011 by a programmer, and if you want to see what it looks like, well, oh right, that's just the current Nether Fortress, isn't it? Oh, the one they revealed in these early screenshots is the same one that exists 11 years later? Well, I guess that's the Nether for you. However, they also at the same time as hinting this, Jeb actually was the one talking about this. Jeb was an architect for a lot of 1.0. He also hinted they would double the number of mobs in the Nether, which sounds like it's kind of big until you realize one of them was going to be a retexturing attempt, and therefore you're actually adding two new mobs to the game, one of which is retextured. By the way, what do you assume the retextured mob will be? I'll give you 3 seconds to guess. Yeah, it has to be said, this is one of the laziest mob designs on paper. I mean, in Minecraft though, because there aren't so many of these outside of the trillion zombie variants that exist, it doesn't actually feel that lazy. They do feel like they have distinct purposes and uses, and I think that's a great example of how a retextured mob can be something. And so to summarize, the Magma Cube and the Blaze were the brand new mobs, and the Nether Fortress was the brand new structure, giving purpose to this dimension. However, they were all developed with the Java edition specifically in mind. This is not a criticism, to be clear. The Java edition was the only edition of the game that existed, and the console edition would not come out until the next year, and this meant that when the console edition came out, it had to work out a lot of questions about the Nether, and because of its limited world size, answering those questions about the Nether made answering questions about the Nether Fortresses even harder, because the Minecraft console edition world size at launch of the Xbox 360, because it's a console platform release, it has to run at specified frame rates and resolutions, because of that, it was a 864 by 864 limited world. It's kind of funny how Minecraft went through this big development to go from these weird limited worlds to these infinite worlds, and then when it came to console, it went back to limited worlds, but 4J Studios, the developers, made the best of it, and they made a Nether which was 1:3 scaled with this overworld. There was still a reason to use it to cross the world, it was just slightly less, you might say, and so this Nether was a great fun thing by itself, but how would you solve the problem of putting a new structure, which was meant to be hard to find, into a very tiny Nether? I really can't stress enough how 286 by 286 blocks is not enough, but I also can't stress enough that people would have already explored their Nethers some amount of the way before the update came out. So the problem was that they had tiny Nethers, 286 by 286 blocks, where people needed a rare structure that otherwise wouldn't spawn if they ported it from Java, because they were much rarer than that sort of coordinates, and also there are rare things inside the Nether Fortress, the Blaze mob being one and the Nether Wart being the other, which were required for other game mechanics, namely potion brewing. You wouldn't be able to brew potions if they ported the Nether over from the Java, and you wouldn't be able to beat the game on a brand new world, and so how do you possibly solve that? The answer is two clever, simple solutions. One is making Nether Fortresses a guaranteed spawn in your world. Now everyone can have access to Nether Fortresses, but then they even looked out for existing players where if you'd already explored your Nether, partially or fully, they added a brand new biome so that even if you'd explored the chunks where your Nether Fortress should be, you could still find the Nether Wart. That's right, the Nether Wart Valley was an exclusive and fun biome they added to the console edition, and honestly, you might not have ever known that it was a brand new biome, or even that this wasn't normal Minecraft generation. But it doesn't exist on any other version of Minecraft, and so it is, to this day, still a console edition exclusive. By the way, this is actually gameplay of me walking around the Netherwart valleys in my world. It's a pretty empty biome besides my Blackstone Desert Well and Desert Temple. Yeah, the Nether was pretty empty, just like the changelogs until 1.4 and 1.5 when Wither Skeletons and Nether Quartz were added. 1.6 was also when they added the chests to the Nether Fortress. Wait, for real? Seriously, the Nether Fortresses before 1.6 didn't have any chests. That's gotta be wrong. That's a mistake in the changelogs, and what the f was the point of these areas? Was the Nether Fortress seriously a structure you would go to kill blazes and then never need to go again? This entire thing, the one piece of actual content in the Nether had one purpose and that was it? That is crazy. Man, seriously, 3 updates in a row of making the Nether slightly better, but they were needed. How did they do nothing before this? I really am confused by that. If there's one thing we actually can learn from the Nether, it's that Minecraft has a long and proud tradition of adding things and then them being useless for years until they work out the reason. Obsidian with the Nether portal. The Nether itself and Nether fortresses are prime examples, but it's something they've done with many aspects of the game, which honestly makes me more, less disappointed with certain features. People like to point at the foxes, they like to point at sweet berries or glowberry, they like to point at things and say, so where do these things go? And ultimately the answer is well, not somewhere right now, but hopefully having more content in the game means they have more things to tie into later. That's why even though copper is the most disappointing ore by such a long stretch, when you compare it to the other ores, it's not so bad. You look at lapis lazuli and it was just blue dye you had to mine for until it became the enchanting ingredient. Wow, that is a lot better. You look at gold and it's this was currency before currency existed, and now it's useful for all sorts of applications. I mean, powered rails were just the beginning. Golden apples and golden carrots are valuable, and it can be farmed. They extend on the feature as they get added, and that is definitely what they did with the Nether. 2010 is when they added it, and it wasn't until 1.6, they were just adding horses at this point in time, that they finally got around to saying, what if there was a real reward for going here, which is crazy just to say. But we need to move into the modern Nether now. After finally getting on the wagon of updating their previous features, you might wonder what happened in 1.7 and 1.8, 2 of the better Minecraft Java updates of this era, and the answer is nothing. Well, 1.9, which entirely overhauled the end, surely made some change, and no, the answer is they didn't do that either. However, 1.10 was the next update they approached to actually improve the Nether, and in terms of the breadth of the content, it was probably the best update yet. It had red Nether brick, it had Nether warts and magma blocks, which were all interesting additions by themselves. If I said all, I meant just magma, by the way, which was a fascinating new block, not just in terms of its texture, but also in terms of the functionality. It would hurt you for standing on it unless you had a fire protection potion or unless you were crouching. It is a block which theoretically could be used to make all sorts of interesting builds and traps where people would fall onto magma and have to know how to escape it. However, even though having a fire protection potion or having the boots or whatever would be quite the challenge to get on top of, the fact that you can simply sneak on it means that it was never really explored in that much depth until 1.13 came out, funnily enough, the aquatic update, the exact opposite of magma, but when they added the ability to make these bubbles appear out of it, which would drag people down, that at least was enough of a use to have people enjoy magma. However, they then made magma not a Nether block, and so the most exciting thing they added in the biggest Nether update yet was a feature that got exciting when they added it to the overworld and gave it a real use in the overworld, which is not the best thing to say yet. I think the Nether at this point clearly had gone through a lot of changes. They were updating Minecraft in massive ways in the overworld, but trying to find the exact fit of what you do with this hellish dimension is not something they could easily do, which is why they tried, rather than these small piecemeal updates they've done forever, for something dedicated to just the Nether. Imagine that, an update for just the Nether. What would they call that? This update is one of the most fondly remembered in Minecraft history. It added 4 new biomes, dozens of new blocks, a new structure, and 7 new mobs. Also, a friend in the form of the Strider. I mean, he's a mob, but I mean, look at this guy, isn't he adorable? This update was so big and so focused on the Nether that they actually had to add more clues for players to actually go here, because Minecraft is famously the game without an instruction guide, unless you're playing Console Edition or Bedrock, which is actually 2/3 of the editions. But Minecraft famously doesn't tell you what to do, but now they've added a way to hint that you should maybe make a portal by having some incomplete ones spawn around the world. This addition and and the entire theming of the update meant that many players would start to experience this entire dimension for the first time, and instead of getting a bland world of just endless red blocks, they instead got a much more interesting world with variety, texture, and depth because different biomes had different benefits. Do you want to avoid ghasts? They don't spawn in the two types of forests. Do you want to find food? There is a type of that exists in the Nether, and it looks like it's a mob, but you can totally just eat it. You're not a vegan in Minecraft. You can even pre-cook it first, so you get cooked pork chops, which is a really fun little snack. However, the Nether update is where this story logically might come to an end. You think like, wow, the Nether is good now. There's lots of biomes, but actually the Nether update had a very troubled development tale, something we learned from King B Dogs, who revealed this on a podcast recently.
The first mob that I ever worked on was the Strider, and that was an interesting experience because everyone in the studio, or at least in the vanilla team, was like, we don't want to touch this mob. It looks ugly. We don't feel it looks vanilla.
Can you believe that there were people against the Strider? How did anyone hate this guy? It's funny that one of the features that feels like the worst fit for an update is maybe one of the most loved things. I mean, you could also argue this exact same feature has the problem if it has one purpose and not many people use it for that and no one uses it for anything else. But there is a much bigger point here because he revealed something huge while talking about this and the Nether update.
You know, this is something that I think people don't understand. A lot of people say that the Nether update was like a really big update, and they wish that we would do big updates like that again. The thing is, the Nether update, we intended it, like, at least in terms of the planned features we had of like, okay, at some point we're going to stop here, but this is all the cool ideas we have. You know, it was like probably 6 or 8 times the size of what we actually released. We had so many ideas.
Wait, did he really just confirm the Nether update was going to have 6 to 8 times more content than the actual release? One of the biggest and most lauded by the community updates in history was going to be multiple times bigger. I've heard this off the record from a few Mojang developers, and you know, honestly, it just sounded like a nice thing for them to say. I've heard all these amazing ideas that were going to be in there, but this is public confirmation that there could have been more biomes, more mobs, and more that just didn't make the cut for the final update. Imagine a mob that swims through the lava. Imagine a dragon or some form of seasonal event that's flying through the Nether. Imagine a new tool that is specifically for Nether caving. I mean, if you imagine a 3x3 pickaxe that mines 9 blocks at a time but takes 10 times as long, it wouldn't be useful for lots of scenarios, but it would be great for the Nether where you can instant mine, and there would be so many great ideas. I mean, imagine adding a new structure to the basalt delta to actually make it tolerable. Imagine adding more biomes so you had to see fewer of these things because they were diluted. There are so many great ideas that I can imagine, and I imagine that Mojang did a much better job than some guy on YouTube, and yeah, it is a little bit sad to hear that they didn't make it, but I think it also shows the ambition of an update is a powerful thing. I mean, even though he almost said it as a bad thing, that there was 5 to 7 times more content that we didn't get to see than what we did get to see, it sounds like they almost curated a lot of really good stuff, and that high ambition led to a higher output. I mean, think about it this way. They delivered just about everything they said they would deliver with the wild update, and some people are left disappointed, and that is something that proves that you need to have lots of ideas that you can cut. There's this famous phrase when it comes to editing that you actually want to over-record so you can cut down later down. There is always another 10% you can remove from a script or a cut or a direction. I think Star Wars is famously a movie that was going to suck really early on until someone went and edited it to make it actually flow together correctly, because if you take away lots of scenes that people really put a lot of effort into filming, if you take away content that people put time into working on the ideas for, you get good results. And honestly, it's kind of crazy because these ideas which were conceived, honestly, did take up a lot of development time. Minecraft have said before, the reason it takes so long to make updates is partially implementing on Bedrock and Java, partially, you know, it's like having lots of people coordinate and having all these high quality texture assets and audio assets, etc. But a part of it is just making good game design. They only want to add good things in the first place, so having a list of ideas that is 8 times longer than what you eventually add to an update, that is something that clearly worked out here. And yeah, this was an incredible revelation. I can't stop thinking about how astoundingly amazing a Nether update could have been if it even took 50% more features from that backlog, if it even just took a few extra, and I think that is a great thing because it means that although the current Nether is probably expected to stay roughly the same for some some time, you might assume. I think that Mojang put a lot of time into working on a lot of feature ideas, 7 times more than we have in the game potentially, and if they've done that, that makes me think they're not going to ignore these ideas forever. In fact, it's been confirmed since the Allay's release that there actually was a plan to add that mob as part of the Nether update. I mean, the reason it clearly was head and shoulders above the other 2 mobs that were voted for at that same year's Minecraft Live is clearly that this was a well-planned, well-designed feature that people really wanted, and although it might have been more interesting in the Nether, some might say, as a weird Nether-based mob, they worked on it really well and they made something better. Imagine an Allay in the Nether. It has all of the same functions and purpose, except it doesn't have the lore that eventually turns into the Vex that makes Minecraft's overworld and its pillager system much more fascinating. All of these other ideas which were great for the Nether update might just make their way into the game, but not in that dimension. And there's the fun question that brings us full circle, where we started with an overworld biome that eventually became its full-on dimension, and now we have a full dimension that is so just chocked with features, that is so chocked with content they want to add to it, that they're adding that back to the overworld. And I think that's beautiful, and really only leaves us with one question. Will the Nether always be the most iconic additional dimension in Minecraft? Right now, there isn't very fierce competition. We have an end, which is mostly barren outside of the main lands, if you don't count that one city, and we have a dimension just filled with features and more that they want to add that are potentially even on the way. And so the question is, will the Nether always be its special place? And I think it will, because something that King B Dogs has actually touched on himself, and many Minecraft developers have admitted, is the Nether is wonderful not just because it's a new place filled with scary creatures and the ability to beat Minecraft, but also because the rules of that dimension are entirely different. The overworld is different to the Nether, not only because of its generation. I mean, the Nether is very cave-like and closed off. The overworld is opened up and even has a height limit of 320 blocks versus the Nether's 128. So there are differences in the generation, but what really makes the biome interesting is how it interacts with you, the player, compared to the overworld. So water cannot be placed anywhere in the Nether, and that means you have to really change how you do things in this dimension. Another example would be how lava works. Lava flows faster, more dangerously, and caves are entirely different. There's only single blocks of lava just waiting there to kind of trap you up. There are lots of additional dangers in the generation. There's lots of different fundamental rules that mean even if you destroyed the entire Nether and started again, it would give you different functions as a player. Whereas the only real different function to the end is the fact that there's a void underneath it, and that's kind of the big one. And so if they ever do add another dimension, will they be able to make something which has as fun rules? Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but what I think really brings the Nether apart is that 1 to 8 travel thing. You can forget about it when talking about the 3 dimensions in Minecraft, that you might think they're all equal, but the overworld has so much more content than the other 2, and the Nether has a real interaction with the overworld, which makes me think if they ever were going to add another dimension, they could learn a lot from this place. This has been the history of the Nether in Minecraft. I hope you have all enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like or subscribe or whatever YouTubers tell you to do. I would really appreciate it. And if you like this sort of deep dive, let me know in the comments, and maybe it'd be fun to do another one for that other dimension in the future, huh? Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.